So, last chapter, Orgetorix died after escaping trial and possibly committed suicide, but probably not. So, moving on. Post eius mortem, nihilo minus helvetii id quod constituerant facere conantur, ut effenibus suis exeant. Post eius mortem nihilo minus helvetii id quod constituerant facere conantur, ut effenibus suis exeant. Okay, clauses, where are they? I see two. I see one that starts here with quod, and probably ends at constituerant. I think we could argue about that. It might end at facere. I tell you what, I'm not going to put a close bracket on this. It either ends here or here, and we'll kind of debate that in just a minute. And then ut to exeant is a clause. So what are the prepositional phrases? We have post mortem, really just post mortem, but eius is kind of thrown in there after his death. And e fenibus suis. Verbs, where are they? We've got constituerant, conantur, and exeant so far. Now, speaking of verb forms, though, we do have an infinitive in facere. Now, what about nominatives? We have helvetii here, and I think that is just about it. So, after his death, nihilo minus, which means however, after his death, however, the Helvetians, conantur, they attempt or to try. Now here's where we could say, I think you could argue for two different translations. They attempt facere, to do, id, the thing, quod constituerant, which they had decided, meaning to migrate. Or could you say they attempt the thing which they had decided to do? I suppose you could argue. I kind of like the first one better. So I'm going to just end the clause right here, and we'll say after his death, however, the Helvetians they attempt to do the thing which they had decided. And then in case you've already forgotten, Caesar tells you ut exeant, to leave from their borders, meaning to migrate. Okay, so they're going to go for it. Ubi iam se ad eam rem paratos esse arbitrati sunt, opera sua omnia, numero ad duodecim, vicos ad quadringentos, reliqua privata aedificia incendunt, frumentum omne, praeterquam quod secum portaturi erant, comburunt, ut domum reditionis spe sublata paratiores ad omnia pericula subienda essent. Trium mensum molita cibaria sibi quemque domo effere juvent. Quite a long sentence, but it's not bad, I promise. Ubi iam se ad eam rem paratos esse arbitrati sunt, opera sua omnia numero ad duodecim, vicos ad quadringentos, reliqua privata aedificia incendunt. Frumentum omne, praeterquam quod secum portaturi erant, comburunt, ut domum reditionis spe sublata paratiores ad omnia pericula subienda essent. Trium mensum molita cibaria sibi quemque domo effere juvent. So where do we see clauses? Well, we see one starting it off, right? Ubi, ending at sunt here. And then, let's see, after the semicolon, we have one that starts here with praeterquam, ending at erant. Praeterquam, means accept, by the way, E-X-C-E-P-T. We do see a clause starting with ut here, and that's going to end at assent. And I think that's it in terms of clauses. Now, how about prepositional phrases? We do have quite a number. We have ad, eam, rem. ad duodecim, ad quadringentos, and we have ad omnia pericula subeunda. Ooh, subeunda ends with an nd there. Gerund or gerundive. A gerundive is an adjective. It's describing pericula, so it's a gerundive here. And I think that's it for prepositional phrases. Okay, now let's take a look at verbs. And there are quite a number. We have arbitrati sunt here. And then we have incendunt. Inside of this clause here, it looks like we have a verb here, an errant. Ooh, portaturi errant. What kind of participle ends in it or has a UR? That'd be a future. Vixentu. Comburunt is a verb. Inside this ut clause, we have essent, subjunctive, and ubent here at the very end. Let's go ahead and talk about infinitives since we're talking about verb forms. I see an infinitive here in paratos esse. It's a perfect passive infinitive. And where else do I see an infinitive? Oh, all the way down here at effere. Okay. How about nominative words? Who are the subjects? Well, I don't see a nominative word anywhere in this ubi clause. And that's probably going to tell me that the subject of arbitrati sunt would be the subject of the previous sentence, which would be, of course, the Helvetians. And I'll just go ahead and tell you the Helvetians are the subject of all of these main verbs, it looks like. In fact, even the verbs within the clauses, the main verbs of those little clauses, the subject is still the Helvetians. So actually no nominative words. So let's move on to accusative words. What do we have? Well, opida, sua omnia. Opida is neuter each and every day. Neuter plurals in the name. We have vicos, reliqua, privata aedificia. Aedificium, also neuter noun. O frumentum, omne. And domum, that kind of looks accusative-ish. And molita cibaria. And I think that's it. Any ablative words that we see? I see numero. Of course, that technically could be dative for sure, but I think you've all figured out by now that 99 times out of 100 it's going to be ablative as opposed to dative. And then, let's see, spe, sublata. Those words are both ablative. And I think, domo. Domo is also ablative. All right. So we've pretty much drawn a roadmap for most of this sentence, and I think we could probably figure it out from here. So, when now arbitrati sunt, they thought, that verb arbitror is deponent. A lot of times it really has more of a sense of they considered. I don't know is there a difference between considering something and thinking about something? I don't know. I guess we could get very nitpicky about things like that. But let's just say that it means think, right? They thought. When now they thought that they, paratos es, had been prepared, ad eam rem literally means to this thing, meaning like they're prepared for this thing. So when they thought that they had been prepared for this thing, or I suppose you could say when they thought that they were prepared, if we just treated esse as the infinitive and paratos as more of like an adjective. When now they thought that they were prepared for this thing, well, now we got to go to the main verb of the sentence. They incendunt, they burn all of their towns. Around, odd here means around again, around 12 in number. And what else do they burn? They burn their oikoses. What are oikoses? Those are villages. And how many are those? Around 400 in number. And they burn reliqua privata aedificia, the remaining private buildings. Wow. Okay. Why are they burning their old stuff, their old homes? Well, Caesar's going to tell us. It's pretty awesome. Now, what's the next thing they do? They burn up, comburunt, all of the grain, praeterquam quod, except that which they were about to carry, future active participle, with them. So they burn up all the grain except that which they were about to carry with them. And now we're going to find out why. So that spe sublata, ablative noun, followed by an ablative participle equals ablative absolute. So that with hope of a return home, having been used up really just destroyed, I guess, or removed. So with hope of a return home having been removed, they would be, or they were, more prepared, comparative here, they were more prepared ad omnia pericula sub eunda, to endure all dangers. So that explains why they destroyed all of their property and they burned up all their grain, all their food, except that which they were about to carry with them. They did all that so that with hope of a return home having been destroyed, they were more prepared to endure all dangers. Because when you think about it, if you don't have the luxury of going home, you're going to keep enduring as best as you can. And then in this last little bit, they do give a practical order. They order quemque, I forgot to mark that as a direct object, each person. They order each person to efferre, to carry out of his house molita kibaria, that means flour for himself, trium mensum, of 3 months, or for 3 months, meaning like a 3-month supply worth of flour. So, there you go. They order each person to carry out of his house for himself flour for 3 months, or of 3 months. Trium and mensum are both genitive plural, of 3 months. All right. Moving on, last little bit here in chapter 5. Persuadent raurakis et tulengis et latobrigis venitimis suis uti eodem usi consilio opidis suis vicisque exustis una cum eis proficiscantur boiosque qui trans renum incoluerant et in agrum nordicum transierant noreamque opugnabant, receptos ad se socios sibi ad sciscunt. Wow, that was a mouthful. Lots of proper nouns here. Persuadent raurakis et tulengis et latobrigis venitimis suis uti eodem usi consilio opidis suis vicisque exustis una cum eis proficiscantur boiosque qui trans renum incoluerant et in agrum nordicum transierant nordiamque opugnabant receptos ad se socios sibi ad sciscunt. Oh boy. Okay. Now, what are we going to do here with all of this? This is quite a bit. Well, first, of course, we want to look for clauses. Do we see any clauses? So here's the weird thing about this word here, uti. It's an alternate form of ut. But uti can also be, it can also come from a verb, utor, uti, usu, su, meaning to use. So sometimes you kind of have to play around with that. I would say more often than not, if you saw uti, it means to use, but here actually Caesar is just using uti as an alternate form of ut. Why? I have no idea. Maybe just to mix it up a little bit. But it's going to start a clause, and the clause will end at our subjunctive verb, proficiscantur. And then we have another clause that starts right here with qui, and that clause just kind of keeps going for a while, and it looks like it ends here at opugnabant. Now, what about prepositional phrases? Well, we have cum eis, trans renum, in agrum noricum, ad se. So let's talk about verbs. Where do we see verbs? Well, the first main verb of the whole sentence is persuadent. And inside the ut clause here, we've got proficiscantur. And then in the qui clause, we have incoluerant, transierant, opugnabant. And then in the second part of the sentence, our main verb appears to be adsciscunt. Adsciscunt. So, let's talk about subjects. Well, if you're looking for a nominative, you're not going to find it. And so therefore we have to go back to the previous sentence and then the sentence before that. Pretty much the Helvetians are the subject of this entire chapter. So the Helvetians are going to be the subject of persuaded. Let's talk about accusatives then. Where do we see any words that might look accusative or direct object-esque? And we're looking, and boios right there. Accusative plural goes as, os, es. We have noream. Receptos, probably describing boios. And socios. So just use the looky-likey rule there. And what else do we have here? You might notice that you would expect these three tribes, their names to be in the accusative case because they're coming right after this verb, and we know what the verb means, and we know who the subject is. So why are they not in the accusative? The reason why they're not is because persuadeo is a special verb that takes a dative direct object. So these three tribes are the direct objects of persuadent, but they're dative because persuadeo is just sort of a strange verb. Okay. Let's see, what else could we see? There appear to be some ablative words that we haven't accounted for yet. So, I already told you that all of these words are dative. Now, ablative words, looks like we've got eodem, and concilio, and opidis, suis, and wicisque, exustis. Those are all ablative. And that appears to be it. Okay, so we've drawn our roadmap. Let's do it. So they persuade the Raraki and the Tulingi and their neighbors, the Latobrigi. That was a mouthful. They persuade them to, and this is an indirect command here, they persuade them to, and if we just go to the main idea here, to proficiscantur, to set out with them, and una means together, to set out together with them. Now, what does usi eodem concilio mean? Well, here's the weird thing. Remember how I told you that there's a verb utor, uti, usus, sum that means to use? Well, usi comes from that verb to use. Uti here means ut, alternate form. Usi comes from utor, uti, usus, sum, meaning to use. It takes an ablative direct object. I know that's crazy. So they persuade all of these people to, having employed or used the same plan, with all of their towns and villages having been burned up, they persuade them to set out together with them. Okay, So I know that sounds really, really confusing. Unfortunately, Hans Friedrich doesn't really give you very much to work with there either. It's just sort of a confusing little bit, using uti and usi there. So persuade them, having used or employed the same plan, and with their towns and villages having been burned up, to set out together with them. And they admit or receive, this is kind of a strange thing, the boy, that's how they're pronounced, they admit or receive the boy as allies to themselves, having been rekeptost to themselves, which means having been received to themselves, or having been admitted among themselves. They received them as allies. The boy who had inhabited had inhabited across the Rhine, and had gone over into the field of Noricum, and were attacking Norea, which is the main town. Now, do use the notes at the bottom of page 30. They are helpful because that is kind of a strange, really repetitive way here. They admit the boioi as their allies, meaning as allies to themselves. The boioi having been admitted among themselves. It's just super awkward to translate into English, and it's a bit repetitive. But basically, they make peace with the boi, and because they don't want to fight against the boi when they're making their migration. So, now comes the migration itself. Dun dun dun, through Roman territory. And Caesar says, no, bye.